Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the third of three videos for a review of general chemistry in advance of Chem 2100 or Organic 1. And what we're going to do in this video is we're going to review some of the concepts that are reviewed in Chapter 3 of the Klein textbook. Again, these are things that we think you learned in general chemistry. Chapter 3 in the Klein textbook covers a lot of acid-base chemistry, and that's a concept we're going to rely on heavily. Some of the things I'll point out here are things that we think were introduced or hope were introduced in your general chemistry course, and we will cover Chapter 3 quite a bit more in depth later in the course, but I just want to review some concepts that we're going to rely on later in the course that we think were covered in general chemistry, and we'll find and just kind of are in Chapter 3. So if you're looking for some review as we start the course, here's a good place to find it. And the concept of acids and base are a proton donor and proton acceptor, and the language of conjugate base and conjugate acid, shown with the example of hydrochloric acid here, making a molecule of hydronium ion or H3O plus and a Cl minus as well, and just kind of knowing a little bit about how that equilibrium goes. And we want to extend that to sort of a more general base, or a base that takes away a proton from a general acid, giving us a general conjugate acid and a general conjugate base. And then some specific examples drawn from organic chemistry here, where we have a hydroxide or an OH minus ion deprotonating a carboxylic acid to give a conjugate acid, which is the water molecule, and a conjugate base, the acetate anion here, shown with good curved arrow notation as well. And a base like an alkoxide ion, so a molecule with an O minus on it, and an acid in this case is a molecule of water to give the conjugate acid an alcohol and the conjugate base an OH minus. And we'll even talk a little bit about why one of these reactions is drawn with in as an equilibrium, and the other one is shown as what we call an irreversible reaction. We'll talk about those concepts later. But this idea of acid and bases, or protons being transferred from an acid to a base, are concepts we thought were introduced in general chemistry as well. The other concept from general chemistry that we hope was introduced was the idea of the equilibrium constant, the so-called Ka, which is a product of the equilibrium constant and the concentration of water. So just gives us, in the function is the acid, the conjugate acid, or H3O plus in this case, and the conjugate base, A minus. But more importantly, the idea of the pKa, which is the minus log of that acidity constant, that Ka value as well. Look, we're not going to do long, tedious calculations like you might have experienced in general chemistry, but we are going to rely on the idea that because of that minus log relationship, the smaller the Ka, that is, the weaker the acid, the more of the acid and less of the conjugate acid is present at equilibrium. The smaller the Ka value, the bigger the pKa value, and that indicates, the bigger pKa value indicates a much, much weaker acid. And those are concepts we'll rely on throughout the course. We've got a table like this that's in Chapter 3. We'll see this again repeatedly. We'll talk about more of this in a few weeks in the course, so don't worry if you haven't seen this before or not sure what we're showing here. But those pKa values we can use to explain and rationalize a lot of the behavior that we see in organic molecules in some of the reactions that we'll look at in this course, and even Organic 2 if you stay in for that course as well. And so for now, that's it on the review videos. Just some concepts from general chemistry that we think were important for you to be able to get an opportunity to look at as well. And so we'll get started with some more material in the course as we get into the first few lectures of the term as well. But for now, I think that's all I've got to put for these review videos, and we're looking forward to getting into the first few lectures.